Thank you, Tom. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. It's a real privilege. Thank you for inviting me along. My aim with this talk, what I want you to take away from this is really to demystify what artificial intelligence is. That's my core aim, is how you can think about it so that you can understand, have thoughts about how it can deliver value or opportunities for employing artificial intelligence in order to generate new and more value. So I'm going to kind of speak to your minds rather than your heart, right? How to go about questioning artificial intelligence to think, is it worthwhile? Is doing it worthwhile? But of course, you should also appeal to the heart, and so I thought I'd jump on to showing some current applications of artificial intelligence. This is really done as a mosaic of examples of implementations of artificial intelligence I happen to have on my computer in projects that I'm involved in, collaborators of mine are involved in, or in one case, it's a startup. I'm just going to go back and forwards and play the video again so you can see what's going on there. So the cows in the top right-hand corner, you'll be very familiar with this, I imagine many of you. You know, putting fitness trackers on cows, which then, by applying artificial intelligence over that, you can identify whether the cow is in heat or not, and then extending on from that, whether it's got mastitis or other diseases, whether it's showing lameness, this sort of thing. Giving value back to the farmer in terms of early indication, or perhaps some sleep, not having to stay up all night watching a cow, for example. And then that's moving bottom right into then, rather than dedicated sensors, more generic sensors that you can put artificial intelligence on. So that particular one has the ability to identify objects, so it can count cows. Just a simple camera in the barn with some AI behind it, and can identify there, for example, that an intruder has come into the barn. So that could be an early warning system, for example, for intruders. But of course, that's being refined to then identifying individual animals and the behavior of individual animals and what they're doing over time. So perhaps replacing, for example, dedicated sensors with just simply a camera that can say, yeah, that cow's lame, or that cow's, you know, developing a condition, behaving oddly, that sort of thing. The top is a big area of work that I've been involved in over the years with many different industries, and that specific one was an application we developed for farmers in India, where they got the artificial intelligence told the farmers through a simple text message when the optimum time is to plant, in the initial case it was groundnut, in order to maximize growth, to coincide with the monsoon rains and things like that. And in the first year, the farmers who implemented that improved their profits by 20 to 30%. And then that's now been rolled out for about 5 different crops in India. But importantly, getting the user interface right, so it can't require a really complicated, elaborate, really attractive, but unusable screen. It's simple text-based messages. Look, here's when you need to sow, here's when you need to plant. Bottom right, we're seeing a lot of applications of then automation in different areas of the farm, of course, driverless vehicles and things like that. A lot of it was alluded to in the video at the start of the session. Automated irrigation systems is one that collaborators of mine have been working on, so automatically working out how much water should be dripped where in the field, given a precise understanding of what's on the soil, what weather is coming. Perhaps there's a rain shower coming and you don't need to irrigate, for example, but calculating the water balance, and in extreme cases, if there's a big storm coming in, automatically turning that irrigation rig so that it's perpendicular to the wind so it doesn't get blown over and things like that. And all of that being automated, saving a lot of fuel, for example. But I've spent my career working with organizations and in research, really trying to identify how we get value from doing analytics over data. And we always need to bring it back in terms of identifying whether something is worth it. Well, what's the problem that's going to be solved, and what's the value that we're going to get from that? And on the right-hand side of the slide there is just the sorts of values then that we're trying to generate by applying artificial intelligence in agricultural scenarios. Can we generate more money for the farmer? Can they get more money by wasting less produce, waste inputs? Now, these are very real projects that we're working on. Or the broader definition of value. How can we enable a better systemic management on the farms and improve sustainability or longer-term soil health, and these sorts of things. In the more recent year, as a business development manager, I've worked in multiple industries around the world, not just agriculture. particularly focusing on, okay, so what's the values we can generate by applying analytics over data? So very common question everywhere. But in the last year, 100% of those conversations have turned into, how do we get value from applying artificial intelligence over data? And the reason for that is that AI, artificial intelligence, not artificial insemination, artificial intelligence is the de facto mechanism we use to translate data into something that's useful, is usable, that a decision maker goes, yes, now I'm going to make a decision on the basis of that. It's become synonymous with it. And so my definition of AI is something is simply where computation is done over data in order to give us some value as a result of that. But as a result of that change, kind of that broadening of the definition of AI, it makes sense to be talking about AI right now, because some of you might be thinking, this, AI, it seems perverse to be talking about the value of AI in agriculture right now. What's the value of data? What's the value of computation over data and things like that? But the reason for talking about AI is that that's really the phrase we now use for the mechanism that we use to turn that data into value. But that said, I don't think we're short of ideas of how we get value from doing computation over data. Really, the real problem we need to work out is how we operationalize that so that it's beneficial for all the participants who are using the systems, and how we actually make it work on farm or in supply chains. I'll come back to that at the end. But I wanted to demystify artificial intelligence for you, because I think that people think it's a bit inaccessible, and it's actually a lot simpler than it's made out to be. For me, it's anything where, a machine is doing something smart in light of inputs. So in that context, many of you have been using artificial intelligence for a long time, for decades. Early expert systems, you have a list of possible questions someone could ask, or symptoms, and then you have a list of answers. That's not sophisticated computation to say, if they ask that question, that is the answer. But that falls under the new definition of artificial intelligence. And where all the new excitement has been that we can do much more powerful computations in that black box in the middle. So we can start to say, well, we can identify faces, we can recognize we can predict things further into the future and so on. But functionally, it's still just how do we get value from data? So the big questions about how we get value from big data and so on, well, you use AI in order to derive value from that. So they're all synonymous. And on the right-hand side, there is just examples that I'm currently working on, collaborators and so on, about how we're getting value from artificial intelligence on farms. So predicting tuberculosis, mastitis, given the different data inputs, notifying you whether a cow's in heat. A lot of it alluded to the videos I showed you before. And so given that, for those of you who are looking to, well, how can we derive value from this? How can I actually get more profit, more sustainability, more happier employees or whatever as a result of doing analytics over data? Because I said that AI is really synonymous with the process we use to get valuable insight from data, then I find this a very useful conceptual model for how we think about how we do the different options we have for how we can go about getting value from data. Because if something seems too hard or too expensive initially, you may pick a different option. So to explain it, you've got data on the right-hand side that tell you about something. You think, if I could only analyze that, then I could make a decision. On the right-hand side, you've got the action that is taken. Only one of those arrows, the black arrows, are where the AI or the computation is actually producing the information. And then the gray arrows is where the human brain is then producing more information in light of what the AI is given it. So only one, there's 5 arrows actually there, because one's branched, 5 black arrows. Only one of them is the computer is actually, or the machine is actually making the decision on the farmer's behalf. And I think that the vast majority of scenarios are going to involve the other arrows. It's going to require a human decision maker in between to go, right, as a result of that, I'm going to make a decision. But it's important to be aware that there are different scenarios there. So often people latch to, well, I want an AI that's just going to tell me what to do. And you realize, oh, no, we don't understand enough about the system in order to do that, or it's not safe, or it's not reliable, or people are not going to accept it, or there's all the manner of, all number of very valid reasons for why you won't do it. But that doesn't mean you should stop. That means that there are other ways in which you can enable that value to be realized. So you might go, actually, we could serve to a decision maker some relationships that might imply a decision that could be made. For example, that beyond a certain level of fertilizer applications, I'm not receiving any more profit. And then someone can decide, actually, maybe I'm over-fertilizing, for example. And so actually, a lot of the initial applications I think we'll see on farms are at the descriptive analytics end. You know, from the motion trackers on the cows, simply it started with, well, let's see what a cow's doing. Oh, you know what? That could indicate that the cow's in heat, that spike. In the bottom right, actually, I'm doing it myself. This is a cow fitness tracker that's made for humans. It's called a Fitbit. And I'm doing a clinical evaluation right now where we're going, look, it's really tricky. Doing AI, it absolutely should be tricky to come up with kind of recommendations as to what medics can do. But what you can do is simply service to them, and that dashboard in the bottom right is just outputs from these devices that allow them to more quickly go, yeah, I need to do an appointment with this patient because there's a problem. I'm starting to detect things earlier. And so it can start there, and if you start there, you have a more solid foundation of understanding as to the additional things that you can build. Top right is from the FarmBeats solution that we're working on, which allows you to combine a coarse resolution of infield sensors like soil moisture meters with aerial imagery and do some AI in between that says, well, given that and that, we can do quite an accurate high-resolution soil moisture map across the field without having to invest millions in sensors or without having to employ lots of expensive processing. So trying to really democratize the process of deriving the information. I put a paper out recently, and if you email me, I can send you that, or you can just search for it, where I scoped out where I think we're going to get value from AI over the next 10 years in agriculture across the world. I won't go into it in detail, but just to point you towards that. But all that said, I don't toil about how can we actually get value from artificial intelligence in agricultural systems in my day-to-day job, because we're seeing enough cases of that. My big frustration, like a lot of people working at the innovation end, is all that built-up potential. There's all that value that is not being realized. And trying to identify and work on the blockers that are preventing that. And then it comes down to, well, how do we operationalize this in a way that is usable by someone? So how do we need to do more on-farm, in-supply chain, real evaluations of ways of doing this that actually work, to identify the solutions that actually work. That's one. But increasingly, the solutions, if we look at how we're actually going to realize these value benefits, productivity gains that we're wanting, we need in our production systems, those product supply chains depend on data supply chains in order to realize that. I sometimes wonder if someone who's an expert in product supply chains, if we were to look at how we're using the data and supplying that and how we set up those supply chains, to look at how we're doing that with it being siloed and inefficient and wasteful and not fair trade, they'd go, that's horrible. That's like how our supply chains were 100 years ago. So we need to work out a way in which we have data supply chains that are sustainable and are fair trade and are efficient, and setting that up right so that the producers of the data are receiving the right rewards and value is being realized all the way along the supply chains. So that needs to be looked at both on the ground level in terms of how we actually realize that value. A farm advisor is actually going to, what they're going to see in front of their eyes in order to deliver some value, but then also organizationally, how we as collaboratives should be exchanging data in order to realize value. And I know that, for example, the Agri-Tech Centres, Agrimetrics in particular, is looking at how we can set up those data collaboratives for the UK, which is what we absolutely depend on in order to realize these production gains that we really need. And thank you very much for your time. I hope that helped my perspective on how to think about AI is kind of more settling, more grounding, less inaccessible. Thank you very much.